I like to think that in general, when I post a new video, I know how you guys are going to respond to it. I might not know how the overall population of Yu-Gi-Oh players or ex-Yu-Gi-Oh players is actually going to watch that video and how they're going to respond to it, but as far as my own subscribers go, I kind of know that you guys, for the most part, are going to agree with me. Otherwise, why would you be subscribed? And yesterday, I posted a video talking about nightmares, and I was extremely surprised. I was surprised because a lot of you think extra linking happens a lot more than it actually does, and we're going to talk about that in today's video because I was just taken aback. I mean, really, I had no idea that people really thought extra linking was this huge issue. And like I posted on that video as one of the pinned comments, I've played in like 10 plus premier events over the past like link format type thing, like the last season of Yu-Gi-Oh! I've never been extra linked, not a single time. And while that might sound like confirmation bias, it turns out that there's actually three really big things that keep extra linking from actually happening. And in today's video, we're going to talk about those. But the reason that I wanted to make a video about this, the reason that it's even worth talking about, is because two of the top comments on that video are like really weird. They just seem so strange from my comment section. One of them says, usually I'm not one of these scrubs, but in my opinion, nightmares aren't used as a supposed extra deck toolbox, but instead are the Yu-Gi-Oh equivalent of solitaire, and that really isn't fun to play against. And that's like the top comment. The next one says, saved, links are ruined. I completely hate dealing with nightmares. It has made me take a break and stop playing. These were surprising to me because I don't really see extra linking or nightmares as overpowered simply because extra linking doesn't happen like that often. This is very similar to that FTK video I made. I'll probably title it pretty much the same way, where FTKs look really good in YouTube videos and they might have some cool 2-card or 3-card combos that you might think come up a lot, but a lot of the times they just don't work. Almost every single Norden FTK that was revealed to work never actually topped any events. The only thing that actually like topped an event, there's like a YCS top with the Firewall Dinosaur FTK at one event before Firewall got limited, and then recently with Pendulum FTK. But Pendulum FTK was a whole different story because the reason that deck was good is because when the FTK didn't work, you actually were just still playing the best deck in the game. Whereas with extra linking, if you're extra linking, your deck is almost entirely designed to do it, and if it fails, you don't really have a good board. So let's talk about the three main reasons extra linking doesn't work. So the first reason, very similar to FTKs, is that those types of decks tend to not be as consistent as other types of decks. So of all the extra link strategies out there, there's a couple. There's like windups, which I've posted deck profiles on. I guess like fables, spirals, which really don't end with extra links that often. They just end with a big board. Of all the extra link strategies, I think the one that actually matters and the one that's worth talking about because it's the best of all of them and the most consistent is Goki's. And even that deck isn't that consistent extra linking, but it is the most consistent, so it's worth noting. But in general, the reason that extra linking isn't like one of the top decks, I mean, it's one of the top decks, but it's not like the top deck. I mean, Trickstar Sky Strikers and the pure Sky Striker deck, those don't extra link ever. I mean, that's just, they don't even have the cards to do that. So it's really like we're looking at Goki's, because even though I kind of fit Spirals into that category of a deck that uses Nightmares to make big boards, a lot of times they're more focused on ending with Sleeper and Last Resort than they are extra linking the opponent. But with Goki's, they actually do extra link the opponent. That's probably like the best strategy that can do that. But other than that, pretty much all the extra linking strategies are incredibly inconsistent. They play a lot of Garnets, they're not good going second, and all that sort of stuff that you find with an FTK deck as well. Also, like a helicopter just started, so sorry if you can hear that. But yeah, in general, they're just not consistent enough. That's like the biggest thing. But Goki's are a decent deck. Why don't we see them extra linking every single match? Well, here's another thing. Well, you can stop extra linking before it happens pretty easily. I mean, like, way easier than it sounds like from these comments. And if you're losing to a lot of extra links, there's a lot of stuff you can do to prevent your opponent from doing it. Now, they all pretty much involve hand traps. I know that starts like a whole nother argument on about people not liking hand traps, but it's really not that hard. Most of the extra link decks lose to one hand trap, whether that be Ash Blossom, which I know is a little bit out of everyone's price range. Ghost Ogre works as well. Effect Veiler works as well. Effect Veiler is actually really good against Gokis if you can't afford infinite impermanence. You can just effect filler the Isolde, pretty much stops their entire turn. That's really powerful. And besides all those things though, even just playing Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries and putting in 1 copy of Spiral Double Helix and 1 copy of Isolde into your extra deck, that'll pretty much prevent you from ever getting extra linked. And this is kind of what I mean by these comments surprised me, because most competitive players don't take extra linking too seriously, because you can just have any hand trap and it'll pretty much stop their whole combo from extra linking you. Yeah, they might still make a decent board, but they're not going to extra link you every single time as long as you draw like any hand trap, any like competent hand trap. But like I said, you don't have to break the bank with cards like Ash Blossom. Even cards like Effect Failure and Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries will usually get the job done, which I think is a pretty decent counter to those types of decks. So if you're losing those decks a lot, one of the measures that you can take, and the second reason that these decks don't work that often, is you can just play a couple hand traps and you'll probably not get extra linked. The final thing, the third thing that I want to talk about is that if you do get extra linked, they're often not that hard to break. So evenly matched is probably like the best counter. Yeah, they can give you the Ibly, but a lot of times from the deck profiles that I've been watching, the people are saying they're not giving their opponent Ibly anymore, only because your opponent can then do stuff with it. But a lot of times they don't give you Ibly, and even if they do give you Ibly, you can just crash it into one of their monsters, and then you can hit them with an evenly matched, and that'll just win you the game right there, because now they've just invested their entire hand into this one board for you to just hit it with an evenly match, get them down to 1 card. That's an excellent counter. Now I know what you're thinking, or know what some of you are thinking. Evenly match is too expensive. That's okay. There's actually a budget alternative. Ring Dragon of Ra Sphere Mode is an excellent counter to those decks, and that card is not nearly as expensive as Evenly Match. If you just side deck 3 copies of that guy, tribute 3 of their monsters, it not only breaks the extra link, but also gets most of their monsters off the board, so they don't have their protection effects, the co-linked effects. Then you don't have to deal with the extra link. So not only are those decks inconsistent, especially when compared to most modern like tier 1 decks like Sky Striker Trickstars and even regular Sky Strikers, they're just way more consistent than Gokis or Spirals. So they're not very consistent in general. I mean, generally speaking, they're just not very consistent. I mean, it's hard saying that because Gokis aren't a bad deck. It's just all the I kept getting comments about other extra link decks. People saying like Wind-Ups are like overpowered, and I was like, no, they're not. So consistency is a big issue. Second issue is that you can always just hand trap them before they make their huge board. That usually prevents them from extra linking you. And then the third thing is, even if they do extra link you, there are plenty of outs. 2 extremely well-known and well-used ones, Winged Dragon of Ra Sphere Mode and Evenly Match. So even if they do manage to make that board, you usually can just out it fairly easily. Now, what can we learn from talking about this? This isn't something to be afraid of. I know that on my channel, a lot of times I'm not talking about current Yu-Gi-Oh cards. I mean, sometimes I do, but in general, we're looking at the past and saying, okay, these cards weren't as good as we thought they were. And I think the problem is that when you're in the moment, it's kind of hard to analyze what's going on and say, okay, extra linking isn't as scary, because back in the day when we were like facing a lot, when Norden first came out, for example, people were really afraid of that card making the whole format just FTKs. I remember when that card first got printed, everyone's like, okay, Necros are done. Like, everyone's just going to play FTKs with Norden. That never happened, and we can look back on that and just look at the topping results and say, yeah, those never happened. But with these extra link decks, it can be tricky sometimes because Gokis are still topping and they are a good deck. I don't necessarily think they're a good deck because they extra link. They're a good deck because they make big boards off of like 2 and 3 card combos, but not all the times do those end with extra links. And I think that really goes to show that sometimes we just need to sit back and look at what's actually happening at a tournament level experience and ask ourselves, are these combos really what's ruining the metagame? And considering that Gokis are like the 3rd or 4th best deck right now, way far behind Trickstar Sky Strikers, which are taking like over 60 to 70% of all the tops, I don't think we can say that extra linking is the problem. I think we can say the problem is things like Scapegoat or things like Sky Striker and Gauge. Those types of cards that are extremely good in pretty much all stages of the game are way more of a problem than extra linking, which happens very rarely. But that'll pretty much wrap up this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the discussion. If you have been losing to extra linking, I hope that my second and third option here really do help you out. Just play some hand traps. Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries in particular is like one of the best counters to those decks because it just completely stops them before they do anything. And then if you can afford evenly match, that card's really good. Otherwise, Wind Dragon Raw Sphere mode is almost as good, and sometimes it's actually better than evenly match depending on what your opponent ends with. But extra linking isn't that big of an issue. Hopefully you guys realize this after watching this video. Just go to some tournaments and watch what's happening to the top tables. Pretty much all the time you won't see more than one table out of the top like 16 tables, which is 32 people. You won't see any extra links happening, and that just doesn't happen that often in competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! And if it's happening in casual Yu-Gi-Oh! Simply just play some of the cards that I mentioned and you should be in a much better position. Thank you so much for watching though. I will see you guys later. Bye.